Good afternoon and welcome. I am Juliet Connolly, and I wish to thank you for joining us for this very special occasion. Our thanks to Manoa Valley Theater, Executive Fellow, Assistant Executive Director, and her technical crew. Also, Alisa Lowe and Misty Kaniko from Bamboo Ridge Fest for their help in putting together this joint fundraiser. Over the years, NBC has hosted countless of PR readers and writers on this very stage. In addition, NBC has opened doors to us and have often been part of our wine and word celebrations and fundraisers. On one occasion, on PR's 25th or silver anniversary in 2003, Eric Stock wrote a poem called For the Love of Emily Ridge. Happy Silver Anniversary. How's it, everyone? And welcome to yet another version of Amber Ridge, something I've been saying at Amber Ridge meetings for 25 years now, hoping that just by repeating it, lovers of local literature will come to love the phrasing, and our audience will grow and will sell more and more books, make more needle money. The dreams of youth are hard. As you can see, we all go back a long way. We needed money then, and we're still needing money. More than ever, we need your money. Today, we are partnering to benefit both nonprofits. NBC through their technical help and Member Rich Press through a virtual presentation of a much-awaited launch of Cathy new book, All the Love in the World. I first saw Cathy at a reading in 1983 at Chaminade on the publication of her first book, of course, the Picture Guide, which won the Real Series of Younger Poets Award. At the end of the reading, I nervously asked her to sign a copy of her book. A couple of years later, my husband and I were in the Los Angeles International Airport when I saw Cathy snatch my silver name. Looking closer, I had to laugh because I knew it. There were Eric Dock, Sarah Young, and Vincent Young, the group on their way home from college. I went over to say hello and we invited Cathy for some Coke and French fries. Of course, I didn't think of inviting the man on my husband. He and I have been friends since. Many years later, I'm still pleased that we at Amber Ridge Press have had the privilege to publish Cathy's latest book. Richard Hugo, who selected Picture Guide for the Yale series, has speech to say an excerpt from his introduction. Philip Cathy's poems show a psychic and culturally range that is much wider, would require a larger force than modern poetry with its inherited literacy and example, possibly a large work of fiction in literature to write to years and years. With Cathy's latest offering, All the Love in the World, Hugo's prophecy, and his fulfillment. And now, finally, here's Cathy to read from her work. Cathy?
Thank you, Juliet. Aloha and mahalo to all for tuning in to Bamboo Ridge's first virtual live stream reading. Again, I'd like to thank, along with Juliet, Manoa Valley Theater for their partnership, for providing all these years this wonderful theater space and technical assistance to make our events possible. And I would also like to express my appreciation to the gang at Bamboo Ridge, especially Joy, Gail, Misty, Normie, Ray, and Wing Tech, knowing that many hands and minds are required in the publication of a book. And also to my wonderful editor and friend, Juliet Kono, who agreed to come out of hiding to keep me company on what would otherwise be a very lonely stage. During these trying times, we have all been asked to adapt to a new reality. So I thank you all for bearing with us, for tuning in, and for supporting us. This afternoon, I'll be reading two excerpts from two short stories from All the Love in the World, which Bamboo Ridge published earlier this year. The first story is called Theories of Flight, and it is the story of Monty Park, who, because his love of flying uh, led him to want to become a pilot, he went to Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1949. So this is a story, Theories of Flight. Monty was a long way from home when he arrived in Tulsa early in the morning in early spring. He had tried to stay awake for the final landing into Tulsa, but had fallen asleep after the last stopover. Revived by the cold air that greeted him, he felt alive to a strange disorientation he had never experienced, and at the same time woozy and lightheaded, as if he had had too much to drink. It was more than fatigue after the hours it had taken to fly from Honolulu to Los Angeles, followed by 3 stops in San Diego, Tucson, and Oklahoma City. It was being transported in reasonably pressurized comfort while one slept, ate, read, and hours later was plunked down in another place and time. He was in Tulsa, but at the same time he was watching his family wave to him in the small window of the DC-6 before the clouds hid all of them from each other. He too was waving, hoping Eleanor knew that he was looking at her as she stood alongside his mother and father and sister. He hoped she knew that she was a part of them now. Before boarding the United Airlines flight, he had never left Oahu. He had never actually left the ground, the red dirt soil of Waihua, until the day he took off from the airstrip near Haleiwa in the Stearman biplane trainer. The exhilaration of that first flight lesson that lifted him, however briefly, above the earth remained an experience he sought to repeat. As often as he could, he would drive out to the airstrip and pay Red, a crusty veteran of the recent war, for flight time. Hours he racked up, often without Red, who preferred a nap in his rusty hangar. He boarded the downtown bus from the municipal airport, trying to hold steady to the plan he had made to stay one night at a hotel before he registered the next day at the school. He didn't comprehend what the bus driver was saying as he searched his pocket for change and, picking up his suitcase, headed toward the back of the bus. Something about the back of the bus being for coloreds. The few people on the bus were seated in the front. He didn't know why he shouldn't sit where there was more room. The bus driver waited, not leaving the curb. He was watching Monty in the rearview mirror. Again, the driver repeated something about not sitting at the back of the bus. Monty sat down quickly, somewhere in the middle. The bus lurched into traffic. The drab color of the buildings, the drab color of the ground and sky, the leafless trees made him wonder if he had made a big mistake coming to Tulsa to go to Spartan. If it doesn't get any greener than this, Monty told himself, I'm going to California. But Spartan was a school that had accepted his application for the airline service mechanics course. It would be a good way to get started, see if he liked it, at least get some kind of certification under his belt. He had no idea where he would spend the night. Once the bus reached downtown, he figured he would get off at the first hotel he saw. More people started getting on the bus the closer they got to downtown. Monty watched the white people board and sit in the front, and the Negroes board and head to the back. He held a small suitcase on his lap so that he didn't occupy more than one seat. As the front of the bus began to fill, the white people remained in the front, standing, even though there were seats toward the back. What constituted the back, he wasn't sure. It seemed that 3/4 of the bus was considered the front. What was left was considered the back. The Negro passengers boarded and seemed to understand just where that line began. Monty Park was born the year Charles Lindbergh flew his monoplane, the Spirit of St. Louis, across the Atlantic from New York to Paris. That and the stories of Lindbergh's roaming days as a flying daredevil in flat places like Nebraska took hold in Monty's imagination. It seemed those flat places with so much sky compelled a person to want to fly. Walking along the wings high above the ground, or exchanging planes in mid flight, as well as specialty maneuvers like spiraling in loops and spins and shutting off the engine at 3,000 feet in order to land gently as a feather, to the roar of the awestruck crowds, filled Monty's mind as he glued pieces of balsa wood in his bedroom, gliders to be thrown like arrows into the air. He was 7 when he read the front page news to his parents about Amelia Earhart becoming the first pilot to fly solo from Honolulu to Oakland. 2 years later, he and his parents heard on the radio that she had disappeared over the Pacific. The Pacific Ocean, the waters his parents sailed across from Korea, the waters he swam in off the shores at Mokuleia and Haleiwa, the waters surrounding Oahu, the tiny island where he was born, among a string of tiny islands in the center of all that water. The ocean Japanese aircraft carriers crossed when they struck Pearl Harbor. It was an early Sunday morning in early December when Mani, walking from home to meet some friends. They planned to spend the day swimming and fishing at the reservoir. Arriving before them, Mani stopped on the bridge leading into town. He liked to look down into the water where, from that height, he could see the sky and his reflection in it. Torrents of black smoke gushing like dirty water from the direction of Schofield, and explosions ricocheting across the cool air like strings of firecrackers broke his reverie. He remained transfixed, confused by what was happening, when a Mitsubishi Zero sputtered into view, flying so low he could see the pilot in the cockpit looking down at him. On that Sunday, the Pacific Ocean had brought the war home. Mani had heard people say that the Japanese couldn't make airplanes, let alone fly them. He had seen cartoons in the newspaper depicting Japanese with buck teeth and slanted eyes behind thick glasses, riding planes that were as flimsy as the balsa wood ones he made. The morning Mani saw the Mitsubishi Zero slowly flying past him, the pilot having flipped back his goggles to get a better look at Mani, a kid, not much younger than himself. The war raging in other places in the world had come home. By the time the enemy pilot was dragged from the wreckage and taken to the fire station, it seemed the whole town of Waiwa had rushed to stand in line to view the body. Mani, crowding over the shoulders of his friends, was certain the dead pilot had been the one he had seen earlier that morning, when the pilot had pulled back his goggles as he flew slowly past, having strayed from his target, or worse, perhaps having even been lost. In that singular exchange of looks, upon seeing Mani, a boy who could have been someone from his own village, it was as if the pilot had wanted to call out to him. Mani had been so close to home that morning when everything changed. Although the Japanese were the enemy now, Mani carried a secret pride that a tiny country in the Far East could give the West such a beating. He had seen the Zero flying so close he could have jumped up and touched its wings. Mani spent most of Saturday catching up on his sleep and reading old issues of Popular Mechanics. He stayed indoors, keeping close to the electric fan, which had been twirling all day, trying to keep cool through the hottest August Tulsa had experienced in 4 years. By late afternoon, he was bored and readily agreed to go to Dawson to see a movie with his roommate, Mohan Mahatra. The movie, Ma and Pa Kettle, was silly, and as the two friends walked to Mohan's car, they agreed that at least it had been cool in the theater, and the movie had provided them with a few laughs, a diversion from the weekends that seemed so monotonous. There wasn't much to do in Tulsa if you were a long way from home. The two friends looked forward to going to school on Monday. Sunday seemed no different to Monty from Saturday. He spent the morning reading the newspaper by the electric fan, his most expensive purchase during his time at Spartan. He didn't regret it. The fan had been worth every penny. The days were chilly when he first arrived, but by the time May rolled around, the temperatures rose to degrees he had never experienced in the cool elevations of central Oahu. Mahatra seemed able to handle the heat better. I'm from Delhi, man, he reminded Mani. You think Tulsa's hot? It's nothing compared to Delhi. When I go home, the first thing that hits me when the plane door opens is a smell, the hot stink smell of my hometown. It just hits you, man, like a bucket of steaming garbage. Mani offered the use of the fan to his friend, noticing that Mahatra never sat near the fan even when the two were in the living room together. With sweat dripping down his temples, he sat away from the circling blades, as if he didn't want to steal any of the breeze that belonged to Mani. He missed Eleanor. Almost 6 months had passed since he left her waving at the gate as the plane took off. During their separation, he had written a letter once a week, usually late on a Sunday night. He couldn't afford any more stamps than that. At the beginning, there was so much to tell. He described his courses, the new friends like Mahatra he had made, the movies he had seen. He wrote to her about the nice people of Tulsa. He hadn't expected them to be so nice, especially after that first morning of his arrival when he encountered the invisible line. When he went to Dawson to see movies with Mahatra, who was as dark as any Negro, no one made them sit in the back. The two friends made quite a pair. Mahatra, the plump and swarthy gentleman from Delhi, and he, the skinny Korean kid from Waiwa, two friends who, for all practical purposes, were just as colored as any Negro, if colored meant anything other than white. He didn't write about this to Eleanor. Some things were just too complicated to write about. As he fell into the routine of school and Tulsa became less strange to him, he began to have more time to think about Eleanor. Eleanor had never been in a plane before the day Monty took her up in one. He thought if he took her up for a ride, within moments after the straining of the engine and the bumpy takeoff, she would feel the surge, then the breaking into silence that had everything to do with leaving the dust and the noise behind. The sensation of flight was like being part of an ever expanding circle of rings on the clouds in the sky that made him drive out to Haleiwa on the weekends and spend what little extra money and time he had on flight lessons and rental fees. If he could take her up for a ride, she would understand why he was leaving to go to Spartan. The wind blew her scarf off even before Red's workhorse of a biplane left the ground. Once airborne, he banked so she could see the green sugarcane fields that seemed to splash against the dry slopes of the Waianae Range, and banked to the other side so she could see the white foam of waves breaking at Haleiwa. When they flew over Wahiwa, he circled his family's house. He had done it before, and at the sound of the engine above their roof, as if on cue, his parents came out to stand in the yard, squint up at the sky, and wave. He looked back at Eleanor. She was waving at them, waving, and at the same time trying to keep her hair whipping wildly out of her eyes. Flying the biplane over the sugarcane fields where his father had worked, driving plantation trucks, digging tunnels, laying dynamite, Mani felt released from that physical labor, the knowledge of his father's early years as an immigrant laborer, complicating the burdensome weight of obligation. Once airborne, the years of laundry service his parents performed at Schofield Barracks blew off from his mind, leaving him weightless as the lightness of passing clouds. In the air, he wasn't bound to anything. He didn't have to inherit his father's labor. While working in the shop late one night, wanting to complete his project assignments, an old memory visited him, one he had not thought about in years. He was accompanying his father on an errand that took them through the nearby town of Waipahu, closer to sea level. Hotter than hell, his father used to say. glad he had settled the family in Wahiwa, up in the cooler elevations. Passing a row of low buildings, his father pointed out one that seemed more dilapidated than the others. That's where Shigeru Serukaku built and flew the first plane. He said it so casually that between trying to connect with what his father was saying to the old storefronts along the road, Mani turned to look at the one his father had pointed out, receding despite his father's slow speed. You got it wrong, Pop. It was the Wright brothers at Kitty Hawk. Mani wore the mantle as the family's aviation historian. Built and flew the first plane in Hawaii, his father said, chuckling. Nobody talk about Shigeru Serukaku. He was one car mechanic. I was here working on the plantation when he took one French engine and made one airplane. Can you believe that? He actually took the thing off the ground. People like give the Howleys all the glory, but I tell you, Shigeru Serukaku was the Okinawan guy who built and flew the first airplane here. Mani put down the drill. He looked out from the hangar open to the night sky. He could hear his father's voice so close, telling him the story, as if his father were perched on the wings of the BT 15 he and his fellow classmates were working on. His father never mentioned Shigeru Serukaku again, but at that moment he felt his father's clear admiration for the humble mechanic, and at the same time felt the same admiration for his father, who remained on the ground, destined to move physical matter, cane stalks, rocks, canned goods, sacks of laundry, mountains of sugar, until he could barely move his own body. The second story I'd like to read is called The Book of Enchantments. It tells a story of two sisters growing up in Wahiwa in the late 1950s. And the section that I'm going to read describes the effect the release of the film Flower Drum's song had on them and the family. The first time they were able to see themselves, people who looked just like them portrayed on the silver screen. The Book of Enchantments. Even before Alex and Kitty saw Flower Drum's song, a movie they would each absorb into their personal histories, they were told that their father looked like James Shigeta, good looking for an Oriental. This remark was made none other than by another Oriental, Olivia Park, their father's younger sister. Auntie O happened to mention the resemblance one evening as the girl sprawled on her white chenille covered bed, a Friday night ritual that promised and delivered Coke floats, new hairdos, a manicure, and gossip. All the things the girl's mother did not, could not, would not do. But she didn't prevent the girls from running across the backyard to the original house where Auntie O lived with the elder Parks. The night would end with the two girls and their young aunt snoring softly, teeth unbrushed, the sweet, sugar laced breath of their breathing fluttering the hem of the bedroom curtain. So, what's Oriental? Kitty wanted to know. She was walking around the chenille covered bed like a zombie sleepwalking, arms stretched out to let 10 pink fingernails dry. An expensive vase, Alex answered in an English accent. Auntie O yanked her niece's head back in a ponytail so tight Alex's vision blurred. Ouch! Vase, Auntie O corrected so that it rhymed with lace, race, and face. So Daddy has a good looking face? Kitty looked doubtful. Face, Auntie O enunciated the F so slowly she looked like a beaver with her front teeth exposed. Alex burst out laughing, imitated her aunt, and soon they were both making beaver faces in the mirror, adding crossed eyes, dead man eyes, and other gowlish features. Kitty let her arms drop. The zombie was waking up. She squirmed between her aunt and sister and in the dresser mirror joined in, sticking her fingers into the sides of her mouth, into her nostrils, and pulling back the corners of her eyes. Auntie O and Alex stopped making faces. In unison, they spoke to Kitty through the mirror. Never do that. Kitty turned to them, her fingers still stretching back her eyes. She was smiling. She thought they too were smiling until Alex said, "You're making fun of yourself." Auntie O grimaced as she twisted Alex's thick hair through a rubber band. "Okay, you owe me your turn." Kitty didn't hear her aunt. She felt the familiar tightness in her chest, a sensation only her sister could produce. "You're making fun of me. Hey, let's have fun, girls. Who wants a Coke float?" "I'm not making fun of you. You're making fun of yourself." "But you were making faces too," Kitty said, choking with confusion. "Yes, but not that one." Alex turned to her sister and slowly, with a finger at each corner, pulled back her eyes until she couldn't see her sister staring back at her. "This one." And slowly, Alex began to rock her head back and forth and chant, "Ching Chong, China Man." The zombie had awakened. Anger in the shape of a bat flew out of Alex and clung to the window screen. Auntie O picked Alex up, threw her on the bed, and began tickling her. "Will you stop it?" "Okay, okay. Promise?" "Okay, okay. Never again?" "Okay, okay." When Auntie O finally left the room to get the Coke floats, Kitty, curious enough to brave her sister, asked, "So what's an Oriental?" Alex was staring at the ceiling. "A vase," she said limply. "So why is Daddy a good-looking vase?" Alex let out a dramatic sigh. It always made Kitty feel bad when she did it. "It's like if you say Koreans stink or Korean stinks. If you say Koreans stink, that's bad. And if you say Korean stinks, that's okay." "I don't get it." "Forget it," Alex said. "It's just words." They had sucked their Coke floats until there was nothing left, not even the stiff, sticky foam on the insides of the glass. "Auntie O, yes." "Do Koreans stink?" "No, Kitty. We're the cleanest people in the world on the inside where it counts the most." "Why?" "Because Mr. Ogata, the mortician, told me that out of all the bodies he embalms, Korean bodies are the cleanest. No smell," he said. "And do you know why?" Kitty shook her head in the dark. "Because we eat kimchi, and all that garlic wipes out all the bacteria." Sometimes Kitty wished Auntie O had been their mother. But Alex said it was against the law for a brother and a sister to marry because then their children would be freaks, Siamese twins, connected at the head, watermelon heads so heavy they couldn't stand up. They had to sleep in a special crib, share the same dream, think each other's thoughts. When the lights went out at Waikiki Theater, Kitty thought the palm trees were real and the ceiling was the evening sky, the stars so perfectly spaced. She wondered what the audience did when it rained, rows of umbrellas opening like tropical flowers, families huddling together under all those flowers. When James Shigeta appeared on the screen as Wong Ta, it was like the word made flesh. Kitty leaned over to whisper to Alex, "There's Uncle." Absorbing that talk of face, base, oriental, and race, she had somehow arrived at the conclusion that James Shigeta looked like Daddy because they were clean-smelling, garlic-eating Koreans. That made him a relative, an uncle. "Shh," Alex hushed. She had memorized the lyrics from the album of the Broadway show, listening to the record, side one more than side two, dozens of times. Pat Suzuki and Ed Kenny played the roles. Nancy Kwan and James Shigeta were later given in the movie version, because Auntie O said they were tall and better looking for Orientals. And in the movies, looks were more important than strong voices. In the movies, they didn't have to project their voices as they did on stage. And in the movies, they could always dub in another person's voice, as they did for Nancy Kwan. Looks always won over talent. But Auntie O had assured them, since she had seen Flower Drum Song first, that James Shigeta sang his own songs. Kitty turned to her mother. There's Uncle. Without taking her eyes off James Shigeta, Eleanor sighed. To think he was my classmate. Monty Park sat on the other side of Alex. He wasn't watching the movie. He was having more fun watching his daughters experience what had been recently recreated in their own living room. It was his idea to position the swivel-headed reading lamp like a spotlight on Alex, the self-proclaimed director and obvious star of the show. She gave herself all the fun numbers, the Nancy Kwan showgirl numbers, such as I Enjoy Being a Girl and Grant Avenue. Snazzy routines that gave her the opportunity to show off fancy Radio City Music Hall leg kicks and twirls. Not fair, Kitty whined, knowing in her heart of hearts that Miyoshi Umeki's part was a dud. No fun at all being stuck playing Mei Li, whose numbers never broke out with the brass blaring show stopping zing of Grant Avenue. As a consolation, Kitty was allowed to bang on a drum, an empty oatmeal container Alex was willing to sacrifice, emptying her colored pencils in a hurry, even wrapping aluminum foil around it, convincing her sister that it was a special Chinese drum. 100 million miracles, dum da 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 dum dum, Alex instructed, trying to sell her suspicious sister on the homemade instrument. 100 million miracles, dum da 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 dum dum dum. Kitty whacked on it, sometimes a bit too vigorously. Alex interjected, Cut, cut, softer, lighter. Remember, you just got off the boat from China. You're supposed to be shy. Dum da da dum 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 dum, sometimes too limply. Cut, cut, you're supposed to be happy. You're in America now. For Miyoshi Umeki's other dud of a solo, I Am Going to Like It Here, Kitty insisted on wearing her crinoline as a headpiece. Alex argued that it looked ridiculous, first of all, because it was a crinoline and not a wig. And second, Mei Li came from China, and Chinese women wore long braids. They didn't go around in public shaking their hair back like Miss America. And if anybody got to do that, it was Linda Lowe, Nancy Kwan's character, who was American born and free to shake her hair as well as other body parts at Celestial Gardens in numbers such as I Enjoy Being a Girl and Fan Tan Fanny. Alex cringed and conceded, allowing Kitty to wear the crinoline only because, according to Alex's own logic, as Linda Lowe, then she herself should be wearing it. Alex could barely maintain her impatience at Kitty's interpretation, standing in the small spotlight of their father's steady beam, crinoline shrouding her face like a veil. She looked like a child bride. She didn't want to lip sync as instructed by her sister. She wanted to sing, and sing she did. I am going to Waikiki. Alex jumped up, ready to say, Cut, cut. I am going to like it here, not Waikiki. But she was held back by their father. He was aware of the preciousness of it, the sincerity of innocence, how soon it would be over. One day, Kitty refused to play Mei Li anymore. It stumped Alex, who had refined the role of Linda Lowe down to high heels, anti-O's, towel, only panties underneath, and a fan, pleated construction paper, each vigorous performance requiring a new replacement. Alex wasn't about to give up being a girl, a fun girl, a good time girl, according to their mother. I know, she was talking fast. You can be Wang Ta's auntie and you can sing chop suey. No. Alex broke into a desperate routine, enticing Kitty into cooperating by substituting Jin Tui, the heavenly fried donut, for the pedestrian noodle dish. Breathless, Alex surprised herself by not recalling any of the song. No, Kitty was adamant. Come on, it's fun. Alex was already thinking that if Kitty wore a pillow under her nightgown, she would be big bosom like Wang Ta's auntie, played by Juanita Hall, who was, according to Auntie O, not really Oriental. And besides, I don't even know what the song is about. Sounds stupid to me. Oh, but it's fun. It's really fun. Alex tried to remember the words to the song she had never really bothered to learn. Like the ABC song, in order to find her way through the letters of the alphabet, she had to start at the very beginning, humming the tune until her own words tumbled in. Gintui, she improvised crisp and sweet and oily too. For good measure, she threw in a phrase she vaguely remembered, something about maiden form braziers and the cha-cha-cha. You be Wong Ta's auntie, Kitty cried. You be that fat old lady who sings about food and underwear. I quit. Alex opened her mouth, then shut it. Sometimes there was no way to reach her sister.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cathy. That was wonderful. So, those of you out there gifted by this extraordinary reading experience, and knowing that you now love this book for yourself, we want you to share this love with others. So, everybody, buy the book. Buy the book, buy the book. I promised Winket I would say, buy the book. Okay, now let us turn to a short Q&A session. And here are some questions that people have asked. But if you have questions, and those of you in the audience, if you have questions, please pass it along somehow. Write it on a piece of paper or something. Um, oh, I have a tablet here. If anybody wants, I can pass it along. Okay, but um, we can go on to the first question. And this person asked, what is your, Cathy, what is your writing process? Do you write every day? Um, do you drink coffee or tea? But
I do drink a lot of coffee, but I don't write every day. No, I seem to write in spurts. So I'll have these sort of manic episodes. I mean, I'm not really truly manic, I don't think, but I mean, I have these episodes where I'll write a lot, very intensely, and then in equal measure, about the same length of time, I'll have to rest and really just sort of veg, not reading too much that tax me. And I try to, during those times, just kind of really um, empty my mind, and I don't try to read anything that might influence me in any way. Um, well, I guess I would say that when I'm really in a kind of writing period, I try not to read any kind of writing that I feel might influence me in any way. But when I'm doing that sort of vegging, then I'll do more of my reading.
do you have a favorite place that you like to write?
Uh, well, I have I live part time, spend some part time in Volcano, and actually that's where I do a lot of my writing. And I'm used to sitting out in the cold. I mean, Juliet knows this, and I'll sit on the back porch with all my polar pieces on and a lot of socks. But and somehow I find it very invigorating. Um, Less so here; it's harder here. In on Oahu, in Honolulu, it's so hot, and I kind of like that kind of foggy, gloomy sort of, you know, the mist coming down in fall.
Okay,
And it
thank
just sort of, it creates a kind of interior space.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure the person would be very happy to hear your response. Okay, number two, are your stories fictional or biographical?
I think they're a combination of both. I mean, it's heavily it's a story about my parents, my father especially. Um, but it's not a memoir, and I never thought of it in that way. I didn't want to write a memoir. I began writing a few short stories when my parents were alive, actually toward the end of my mother's life. And then I started writing stories about my father when he was alone. And um, it just were very discreet individual short stories. And I never thought of it as a long piece.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody who has a question from the audience? Oh, okay. Um,
Can I ask a question?
sure.
Why was the airline specified to be United?
Why was it United?
Why did you specify
Oh,
the brand?
I think because I'm a pilot's daughter, and my father, he flew, was one of the early pilots for Aloha Airlines. And so I think we were always conscious about airlines, or we're going to take the TW flight, or a Pan Am flight, United Airlines. It was just something that we were very aware of.
Long ago, you wrote a poem about being home in something like Kahala, and the plane was flying over. And as I remember, it would be your father.
Yes, I grew up in Waimea, but eventually our family moved to Kahala, the Waialae area, and it was a lot of it was because my mother had asthma, and so being in Waimea in sort of that damp climate wasn't good for her. So we moved to a place that was very hot and sunny.
So Monte is like the pilot of that plane flying over the house.
Yes.
He's like free as a bird. But then the story seems to be about race relations.
I think so, because if you read other stories in this book, um, you will very much see that that factors in. That factors in. It's the reason why Aloha Airlines was formed in many ways.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's why I always flew Aloha.
yes, yes. Aloha was always for the local folks, and that's why we were also sad when Aloha was no longer. But there's a story here that talks about these these things, and I think my father made us very aware of. I mean, like, it might seem sacrilegious to say to some, oh, well, he was kind of proud that the Japanese build these incredible airplanes because he was so used to, as a kid, he said, reading in the paper and seeing how Asians were portrayed and um, other things like always telling us that Hawaii, if it hadn't been for World War II, Asians really got the chance in World War II because of World War II. I know it sounds terrible, but that broke open, allowing a lot of the Asians to become soldiers, get the GI Bill, become educated, go to university, become lawyers. Soon they were able to rise up.
So being free as a bird and having those opportunities over time, wouldn't it have mixed up the race relations so that race relations would be maybe featured in your beginning work back when we were emerging out of the civil rights era and not so much today? I'm just wondering why today there's, at least in the stories you read today very well, I love your singing, why it seems like we're going back in time on race relations instead of talking about being free of the bird.
Instead of being free of the bird.
As a bird, the positive side of flying, as opposed to noticing the lines, the orderliness of categorizing people.
Because I think the center story of this book has for, I don't want to give it away, but has for this particular character a real moment where he has to really confront it. It's really affected his life. And then how his life changes in a different way. But I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
Yeah,
But
well, the answer is by the book, and the name of the book is, the name of the book is,
All the love in the world.
thank you.
Okay, this question from Scott. The stories follow Manny Park's life from birth to death and beyond. The last story after Mani's death is told from the point of view of the driver Mobin. It feels very Buddhist in that when one life story ended, another, Mobin's, begins. Was this intentional?
yeah, I wanted to connect the stories somehow, and I, I needed, I wanted the story, all the stories could not just end with the last story being Mani passes away. So there has to be, for me, some kind of transformation, something else that moves on beyond, and um, that's why there's that last story. That made it move out into the world. And also to have one of the daughters grieving, still grieving, she comes to some kind of understanding.
Any more questions? No? If not, this question, how different is writing poetry compared to writing prose? How different are they for you? What were the challenges, the difficulties? This is a long question. Which has been easier for you to write?
When I start writing, when I started writing stories, they went rather quickly. And I don't know if it's because on some vague level they are kind of following a storyline that's already played out. And so I'm not creating something completely from nothing. So I don't know. This is my first experience really writing prose. So if I just go base it on that experience, I would say that prose is easier.
Oh,
And
interesting.
I think, again, too, I think it's because you just seen from my experience, my limited experience of writing this, is that you have more words at your disposal. Um, and you also have, the other kinds of help in the characters and the settings. Whereas a poem, a poem is really a very different process. And Julia,
Yeah.
you were told.
Well, it's limiting, I think. Yeah. Poetry, don't you find it
It's
a little
limiting.
bit? Yeah, it limits you to a certain,
Yes,
to
because
the
it's
form.
so condensed,
Right.
so intense. And sometimes I'll just fret over a comma,
Right.
which is so kind of crazy making, you like to say, right? And whereas this, I felt a lot. I felt really free, and I could compose right on the computer. Whereas with poetry, I have to write
By
pen
hand.
and ink.
Thank you. Okay, another question. What was the impetus to begin this project?
I think I had a couple of stories about my mom and dad, and then I happened to be telling a friend about my father's experience in the early days of aviation, and she just said, you have to write it down. And maybe just my brain was open to that suggestion at that moment, but it was like a koan, and it just hit me, and I go, yeah, I have to write all these stories down, and I have to make it can't just be these disparate things. I have to make something connected in some way. These stories and write more stories. And then I also think, at about the same time, it was the year anniversary of my father's passing, and I was kind of already dreading that day that it was going to happen, that it was going to be a year since he had passed. And as you will see from the book, um, he was a very, very wonderful father, and my siblings and myself, we were very, very attached to both our parents. But because our mother had died quite a number of years before him, we had a long time of just being with him alone. And so, in dreading this memorial that was about to come, I started writing down stories. I just started, and it was a kind of one of these manic phases where I just wrote like a demon.
Mhm.
And it really helped for me, it helped stave off um, depression or getting into a kind of a funk.
Okay, thank you very much. Is somebody wanted to know, is this a short story collection or a novel? But I think you explained, answered it already. But
They're discrete individual stories so that, really, if you just read one story anywhere, um, it would just be complete in and of itself. It's not a chapter. But if you read the entire thing the way it's been laid out, then there is some kind of resonance that's going on.
okay, I think this one last question. How did members of the family feel about this book after having read it?
I don't know.
Oh, no.
Everyone kind of says, oh, I'm starting to read it. Or we just don't talk about it anymore. And I don't blame anybody. Anyone can do what they want to do in my family. So, no pressure.
No.
No pressure. Family out there.
Mhm. Okay, I guess it's almost time. Thank you so much.
I wanted to end with a poem.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
I have something to say. Maybe I would say this and then
You
you can.
want to say that?
Yeah. Okay. I just have a few more words. In this strange and unprecedented time, like most businesses, Manoa Valley Theater and Bamboo Ridge Press are in need of your support. Your generous donations are welcome so that the theater can reopen and that we can continue to publish books of quality by, for, and about Hawaii's people. The work that both organizations do is valuable, viable, and vaunted. We'd like to keep all of our work going, so please help. Donations can be made to Manoa Valley Theater and Bamboo Ridge Press on their respective links streaming at the bottom of your computer screen. Thank you very much, everyone. And Cathy,
Yes.
go
Okay.
ahead.
In closing, I'd like to end with this poem. This wonderful opportunity. May all beings seen and unseen be well, happy, and peaceful, including ourselves. May there be peace in the world, peace in our hearts, peace in our minds. May we use this wonderful opportunity of human life to awaken. May we be grateful for wisdom and compassion, this infinite boundlessness that surrounds us, waiting to be used by us, to open our hearts and minds so that we may see things as they truly are, how brief our lives, how dependent upon others we are. And so with each act, may we bring wholesomeness, humility, and the courage to do no harm, not least of all to ourselves. As we journey through this life, may we move deeper into insight and see things as they truly are, this wonderful opportunity to awaken. May we be grateful for the teachers in all their guises who appear before us. May we love those who are hardest to love, including ourselves. May leaders who will work for the peace of the planet step forward, and may we support them. May those who have gone before us rest in peace, rest in comfort, rest in joy. And may we remember to remember them. May the next life be a happy one. May we cultivate in our hearts, in our minds, here and now, here on earth, generosity, a land of plenty for all. May our wish for peace spread like a mother's soothing hand and reach the distressed, fevered places of the world and protect each child the right to be fed, to be sheltered, to be schooled, the right to go to sleep without fear. May we journey safely, work contentedly, and return home to loved ones well and happy. May the path of forgiveness and acceptance be the path of peace, and may we find it. May we use this wonderful opportunity to awaken and together find true happiness, open spaciousness without borders. Thank you, everyone. Be well, stay safe, keep your distance, but not your hearts and minds from each other. Wear your mask and vote.
Yes. Thank you very much, Cathy.